Hey, my name is Kiana. This is a vlog that I'm calling Church and State. We'll be reading from different Bible versions, the African American Devotional Bible and the Know Your Bill of Rights book. If I use any other resources here, they will be cited. Thank you for joining me. Let's dive in. Picking back up where we left off in Genesis chapter 11, verse 28, and Haran died before his father, Terah, in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. Verse 29, and Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and the father of Iscah. Verse 30, but Sarai was barren, she had no child. Verse 31, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's sons, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his sons Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. Verse 32, and the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. The call of Abram, chapter 12. Now the Lord has said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and away from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. Verse 2, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Verse 3, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. Verse 4, so Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Verse 5, and Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. Verse 6, and Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. Verse 7, and the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give his land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. Verse 9, and Abram journeyed, going out on still toward the south. Abram goes to Egypt. Verse 10, and there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. Verse 11, and it came to pass when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Verse 12, therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Verse 13, say I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. Verse 14, and it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. Verse 15, the princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Verse 16, and he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen, and he asses, and men servants, and maid servants, and she asses, and camels. Verse 17, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Verse 18, and Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Verse 19, she says thou, she is my sister. Why sayest thou, she is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. Verse 20, and Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. Abram and Lot part. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai. unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Verse 5. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Verse 6. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Verse 7. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. Verse 8. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Verse 9. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves, the one from the other. That was verse 11. Verse 12. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. Verse 13. But the men of Sodom were wicked, and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. Verse 15. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. Verse 16. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Verse 17. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Verse 18. Then Abram removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. The Wars of the Kings, chapter 14. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. Verse 2. That these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemiber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. Verse 3. All of these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the salt sea. Verse 4. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. In the 13th year they rebelled. Verse 5. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims and Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims and Ham, and the Emims and Shaveh Kiriathaim. Verse 6. And the Horites in their Mount Seir, unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Verse 7. And they returned and came to Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites, that dwelt in Hazezon Tamar. Verse 8. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same is Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim. Verse 9. With Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. Verse 10. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. Verse 11. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and their victuals, and went their way. Verse 12. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped. Verse 13. And told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner. And these were confederate with Abram. Verse 14, and when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants born in his own house. And that's the end of the reading for today. We're moving on to the message. It's titled, We Walk by Faith, Not by Sight. It reads, who can forget the experience of leaving home after high school graduation for college or to join the military or even to live in another physical location? While you experienced the thrill of being independent, there was also great fear and trepidation. No longer could you come home after work and assume that dinner would be on the table. The security of knowing that you could survive at home without a job or money would from henceforth be absent. The responsibility would now fall on you to guarantee that you had adequate food, clothing, and shelter. As much as you longed for independence from parents, you still experienced the fear of the unknown. Abraham experienced the same doubts and fears we do when initially separated from security and familiarity. Commanded by God to leave home, family, and everything familiar, Abraham went forth on faith, believing that the God who promised blessings and greatness would honor his word and protect Abraham on the journey. Abraham didn't hesitate. He left with confidence as commanded by God. As Abraham journeyed, he found that God was able to provide and protect him in each circumstance and situation. Today, the Lord calls us to separate ourselves from security and familiarity so that we will go forth on faith, not seeing yet, believing that God will open doors we can't see and no human being can shut. We are not given all the plans. We are simply told to follow God's instructions, believing we will be blessed in God's own time and way. We may be called to remove ourselves from a wrong relationship, to leave a job we've enjoyed for years, to forego the pleasures of the flesh, trusting God to bring us a Christian spouse to walk with us through life. The journey of faith is not an easy one to live, but when we take God at His word and step out in faith, the growth, the blessings, the miracles are far greater than we could ever imagine. Let us stretch out and reach forward for all the blessings of God. Okay, now moving on to the additional scripture readings. Joshua chapter 24 verses 2 through 4 says, Joshua said to the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. Long ago your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River, and they worshipped other gods. But I took your ancestor Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him into the land of Canaan. I gave him many descendants through his son Isaac. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. To Esau I gave the mountains of Seir, while Jacob and his children went down into Egypt." This is Acts chapter 3, verses 24 and 25. Starting with Samuel, every prophet spoke about what is happening today. You are the children of those prophets, and you are included in the covenant God promised to your ancestors. For God said to Abraham, "Through your descendants, all the families on earth will be blessed." And this is Galatians chapter 3, verses 6 through 9. In the same way, Abraham believed God, and God counted him as righteous because of his faith. Verse 7, the real children of Abraham then are those who put their faith in God. Verse 8, what's more, the scriptures looked forward to this time when God would make the Gentiles right in his sight because of their faith. God proclaimed this good news to Abraham long ago when he said, "All nations will be blessed through you." So all who put their faith in Christ share the same blessing Abraham received because of his faith. Okay, now this is chapter 5 in the Know Your Bill of Rights book. It's titled, "To Be Armed or Not to Be." The Second Amendment. As a quote, it says, "The strongest reason for people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is as a last resort to protect themselves against tyranny and government." Thomas Jefferson. We have all heard that an armed population is a shield against tyranny, despite the fact that the Constitution does not authorize militias to wage war against the government, an act of treason. Americans theoretically have a right to insurrection to correct intolerable and systematic abuses. As endorsed by some state constitutions, Americans have unsurprisingly embraced the belief that a right of revolution is a natural right. But does the Second Amendment give individuals the right to own and carry weapons, or does it restrict these rights only to members of the militia? Is this a protection of personal or collective rights? According to some authorities, this amendment does not broadly grant citizens the right to keep and bear arms, but instead only allows arms to people who are to serve in a government-regulated militia. If all the amendment secured was the right to be a soldier in the military, a lonely, dangerous affair, could it really be considered one of the great rights of mankind, worthy of constitutional protection? Once again, let's look at the meanings of the key words of the Second Amendment, the amendment itself, and then let's take a brief look at the history of this amendment to make its meaning crystal clear. The key words of the Second Amendment: militia, an army composed of ordinary citizens rather than professional soldiers. Note: a militia can be called up by the government to serve full-time during emergencies. Security, protection from attack or safety from danger of any kind. Bear, to carry something, to move something from place to place. Arms, weapons of offense or armor for defense and protection of the body. Infringe, to limit or reduce someone's legal rights or freedom, whether by intervention or not fulfilling some duty. The Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The story behind the Second Amendment: like many rights, the American right to have arms was inherited from England. In 1689, England adopted its Bill of Rights and endorsed the right of the people to bear arms. But that right was already centuries old. In the 12th century, Henry II had ordered all freemen to have certain arms, and a century later, Henry III obliged all subjects aged 15 to 50 to possess a weapon other than a knife. Crown officers would occasionally inspect subjects to ensure they were properly armed. The reason for this obligation was that England had no regular army or police force, so every man was charged with the duty of preserving the public peace by confronting and capturing suspicious persons and by suppressing riots. In the event of a crime, all men had to join in the hue and cry, calling forth assistance and joining in the pursuit of anyone who was resisting arrest or escaping from custody. In 1671, Parliament infringed for the first time on the people's right to arms, passing a statute that deprived almost all Englishmen of it. Charles II further disarmed his Whig opposition, and in 1686, his successor, James II, incensed Protestants by banning their firearms but leaving Catholics armed. Such royal controls on weapons convinced Englishmen that they must be allowed to own firearms, and as a result, plans were set into motion to secure this right. In the Glorious Revolution of 1689, James II was ousted, and the usurper, William of Orange, promised to protect the Protestants' right to possess firearms. The final version of the law read that the subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defense suitable to their conditions and as allowed by law. England was about 98% Protestant at this time. This law prevented the king from ever disarming the population again because only Parliament could decide what is allowed by law. The right to bear arms was resolutely established as one belonging to individuals. Commonly cited by Americans, Blackstone stated in his commentaries that the right to have arms was indispensable to protect and maintain inviolate the three great and primary rights of personal security, personal liberty, and private property. James Burr wrote at length about the right of the people to bear arms, more than 100 pages to be specific, extolling the values of an armed population in preference to a standing army. A militiaman, he wrote, is a free citizen, a soldier, a slave for life. He argued that the ownership of firearms is what distinguished the free man from a slave, referring to arms as the only true badges of liberty. The Englishman's right to arms was cherished, and English settlers in America were guaranteed all rights of Englishmen. This included, of course, the laws of the English Bill of Rights, which protected the right of Protestants to have weapons for their own defense. Americans came to loathe standing armies. Denouncements of George III were plentiful for using his military as part of a plan to reduce the colonies to slavery. Jefferson vilified the king for using armed forces to carry out policies and indicted him in the Declaration of Independence for having kept among us in the time of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Madison supported national control over state militias as an effective method of minimizing a standing army. George Mason and Jefferson agreed, arguing that well-prepared state militias under federal authority would keep the army small. Thus, our first national constitution, the Articles of Confederation in 1777, stated that each colony shall always keep up a well-regulated and disciplined militia, but it did not say anything specifically about the individual's right to be armed for his own defense or other purposes. Any such right would have to come from state law, and while several state constitutions stipulated militias, Pennsylvania's Constitution of 1776 first used the phrase "the right to bear arms," despite the fact that it had no militia. Therefore, it had no military connotation or significance. A year later, Vermont used Pennsylvania's wording for its constitution. John Adams argued that the individual citizen had the right to arms for his defense, and this position was adopted by the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780, which guaranteed the right of the people to simply keep and bear arms without limiting it to the militia. Virginia's Declaration of Rights of 1776 spoke only of having a well-regulated militia in lieu of a standing army, but it is worth considering that Virginians were to arm themselves and thus provide their own weapons when serving in the militia. North Carolina similarly defended the right to bear arms for the purpose of defending the state. In 1792, Congress enacted the Uniform Militia Act, which called for militias to consist of every free, able-bodied male citizen of the respective states aged 18 to 45, and it stated that every militiaman should have his own weapons, that every citizen so enrolled shall provide himself with a good musket or firelock, a sufficient bayonet, belt, 2 spare flints, and a knapsack, a pouch with a box therein to contain not less than 24 cartridges, each cartridge to contain a proper quantity of powder and ball. Various amendments were proposed at the Pennsylvania Ratifying Convention that constituted a Bill of Rights, and one of the clauses addressed the issue of an individual's right to have arms, that the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and their own state, or the United States, or for the purpose of killing game, and no law shall be passed for disarming the people or any of them unless for crimes committed or a real danger of public injury from individuals. The provision then went on to repudiate standing armies and demand civil control over the military. Luminaries in Massachusetts were of the same mind. Theodore Sedgwick declared that a nation of free men who know how to prize liberty and who have arms in their hands could not be oppressed. Samuel Adams insisted that the Constitution should explicitly provide that it could never be interpreted to prevent the people from keeping their own arms. Lexicographer Noah Webster agreed, stating that the federal government would be unable to enforce unreasonable laws because the whole body of the people are armed. Zachariah Johnson informed the Virginia Ratifying Convention that the people's personal rights and freedoms were safe because they are not to be disarmed of their weapons. They are left in full possession of them. In 1789, James Madison proposed to the first Congress the amendments that would become the Bill of Rights. He included one that was based on his own state's constitution, and it read as follows: "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-armed and well-regulated militia being the best security of a free country, but no person religiously scrupulous of being armed shall be compelled to render military service in person." Madison did not make the right of bearing arms conditional upon serving in the militia. In his personal letters, Madison referred to his amendments as guards for private rights. Similarly revealing is the fact that Madison originally proposed that the amendments be inserted directly into the Constitution at appropriate points. The clause guaranteeing the right to bear arms was to be placed directly after the guarantee of the writ of habeas corpus and the prohibition of bills of attainder, which granted personal liberties. As history would have it, Roger Sherman opposed the interlineations of the amendments because he argued it would give the mistaken impression that the farmers had signed a document that included clauses not of their creation. He and other House members felt the amendments should be lumped together at the end of the document, a proposition that won out, giving us the collective form we know today. In the Virginia Ratifying Convention, Patrick Henry proclaimed that the people's only defense against an army controlled by Congress was the militia. The great object, he roared, is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able may have a gun. At this same ratifying convention, George Mason reminded those attending that the British had previously sought to disarm the colonials in an attempt to enslave them. Who are the militia, he asked. They consist now of the whole people. Jefferson proposed that his state constitution should proclaim that no free man shall be debarred the use of arms. 4 states that recommended amendments to the Constitution urged one that guaranteed the right of individuals to have arms. New Hampshire was the first to propose such an amendment, and it said, Congress shall never disarm any citizen unless such as are or have been in actual rebellion. New York proposed that the people have a right to keep and bear arms, and that a well-regulated militia consisting of the body of the people capable of bearing arms is the proper defense of a free state. Rhode Island and North Carolina recommended similar amendments to the Constitution. The right to bear arms can be regulated by public measures as to the kinds of weapons that are lawful and the circumstances under which weapons can be kept, but no law or rule can undermine the right itself. Militias were only possible because of armed populations that had the right to have arms. As we have now seen, the right does not depend on the existence of militias. Summary: the rights granted by the Second Amendment have illustrious history connected with the protection of freedom and opposition of tyranny and slavery. In today's society, the Second Amendment has proven invaluable to citizens for protecting themselves against criminals. Disarming the people is a sure way to invigorate criminals, as they can get weapons regardless. Regarding its relation to opposition of the government, the Supreme Court said in 1951 in Dennis versus the United States that Congress surely has the power to protect the government from armed rebellion, and that a right to revolution is without force where the government provides a system for peaceful, orderly change. That notwithstanding, should Americans ever find themselves faced with an incorrigible government of totalitarian oppression, a government that has abandoned the very principles this nation was founded upon and that reconstituted a slavery like that of the past, then the people have the natural inalienable right to change the government as they see fit. And the spirit of this amendment clearly applies. Okay, literally bye. I gotta go. I'll see y'all later though.